This happened on the last day of my senior year. Everyone was excited. People were signing yearbooks, saying their final goodbyes, and teachers were letting us get away with practically anything. For most students, it was a celebration. For me, it was just another day I wanted to get through. My school had a tradition where seniors had to check in at the gym at the beginning of the day. You'd go up to a table, say your name, and someone would cross you off a big list with a red marker. That was the school's way of tracking who showed up, in case anything went wrong. Once your name was checked off, you were technically free to leave. Most people did. After I got marked off the list, I was heading toward the exit when I saw her. A girl standing against the wall just past the gym doors. She had long black hair and a black hoodie with the sleeves pulled down over her hands. Her head was tilted slightly, like she was waiting for someone to make eye contact, and when I walked past, she smiled. It wasn't a friendly or flirty smile. It was knowing, like she recognized me, but I had never seen her before. And a school with over 2,000 students. That wasn't exactly unusual, except this didn't feel like a stranger. It felt personal. I gave her a polite nod and kept walking. Maybe she was waiting for a friend. Maybe she was one of those kids who never showed up until the end of the year. I didn't think much of it until I got to the parking lot. There she was again, same girl, same hoodie, same blank stare, standing by the lamppost near the edge of the senior parking lot, as if she had been there all along. But there was no way she could have gotten there ahead of me. I hadn't seen her pass me, and there was only one exit from the gym. This time, she didn't smile. She just watched me. I pretended not to see her and kept walking to my car. I was halfway there when I heard footsteps behind me. Light, slow, deliberate footsteps. When I turned around, no one was there. I drove home, a little shaken, trying to brush it off as a coincidence. Maybe she had a twin. Maybe I was just tired and overthinking it. But something about her face stuck in my mind. That stare. When I got home, I pulled out my yearbook and started flipping through it. I wasn't looking for her, not really. But part of me hoped I'd find a name, a photo, something that could explain what I saw. And then I found it. In the back of the yearbook, there was a candid photo section. Mostly random pictures, people in the cafeteria, football games, hallway selfies. In the corner of one page, there was a photo of the school courtyard from earlier in the year. A bunch of students were sitting on the grass, and there she was, standing, in the background, alone, staring directly at the camera, still wearing that black hoodie, still smiling. I felt a wave of cold rush over me. That picture must have been taken months ago, but it looked exactly like she had earlier that day. Same posture, same expression, like she hadn't aged a single day. I showed my mom the photo and asked if she recognized her. She said no. I asked some of my friends. None of them had ever seen her before. The next morning, I went back to the school to pick up my graduation cap and gown. While I was waiting in the office, I asked the receptionist if she had a list of all the students who had checked in the day before. She hesitated, then said she wasn't supposed to share that information. I told her I thought someone might have been there who wasn't supposed to be. That got her attention. She opened the binder with the senior check-in list and flipped through the names. I scanned it closely, looking for something, anything, that could help me figure out who that girl was. Her name wasn't on it. I asked if anyone else could have checked in without being on the list, maybe a mistake. The receptionist just shook her head. "If you're not on this list," she said, "you weren't supposed to be here." She looked at me a little too long after that, like maybe I had said something I shouldn't have, I left without saying anything else. To this day, I have no idea who that girl was, how she got into the school, or how she appeared in that yearbook photo. But one thing I do know, she didn't belong, and whatever she was, she saw me. This happened when I was in the 5th grade. Our elementary school had this old annex building that nobody really used anymore. It was technically part of the school, but it had been shut down years before because of electrical issues or something like that. The teachers always called it the old wing, and whenever we asked about it, they'd change the subject or say it was off-limits, except for the last day of school that year. A group of 5th graders, including me, were selected to help clean out old storage areas around the school as part of some weird responsibility and maturity lesson. We thought it was stupid, but it got us out of doing worksheets, so whatever. They split us up into pairs and assigned different areas. Got paired with this quiet kid named Easton. He didn't talk much and didn't seem thrilled to be working with me, but we were both pretty shy, so it kind of worked. We were told to head to the supply room near the old wing to organize some leftover science, kits and boxes of art supplies. A teacher walked us over and pointed to the double doors of the annex building. She handed us a key and said, "Don't go past room to B." I laughed, thinking it was just a joke, but she didn't smile. She said it again, slower this time. "Whatever you do, do not go past room to B." I was too awkward to ask why, and she walked away before I could. The building was dusty and smelled like wet wood. Most of the rooms were locked, but to B was wide open. Inside were shelves covered in dust, some broken desks, and a few old filing cabinets. Easton and I started organizing boxes like we were told. It was boring at first. We joked a little, opened random drawers, and even found some old textbooks from the 1970s. Then I noticed a door at the back of the room. It was small, smaller than a normal door, and didn't look like it belonged, like it had been added later. It had no handle, just a narrow slit where a knob used to be. I asked Easton if he wanted to check it out. He shook his head, dead serious. He said we weren't supposed to go back there. I reminded him we weren't past room to B. Technically, we were in it, and this door was inside it. He still said no, but when I reached toward the door, it opened by itself, just a slow creak. Nothing dramatic, but enough to make both of us freeze. Behind it was a narrow hallway lit by a single flickering bulb, and at the end of that hallway there was a desk dot, just one, with a chair facing away from us, and someone sitting in it. I can't explain what I felt in that moment. My brain couldn't process it. There was no sound, no movement, just the shape of a person sitting at a desk at the end of a hidden hallway in a sealed-off building. Easton whispered, "Shut it. Shut it now." I reached for the door, but before I could close it, the chair turned. There was no one in it, but the chair turned, fast, like someone had just spun around in a panic. We both screamed and slammed the door shut. Easton locked it with a cabinet and didn't say another word. I didn't either, when the teacher came back to check on us. She barely glanced into the room and didn't ask any questions. But as she was walking us out, I swear she paused at that little door and just stared at it, not in shock, not in fear, in regret, like she had hoped we wouldn't find it. The following year, the annex building was demolished. The school claimed it was for safety reasons, but no one ever mentioned room to B, and no one ever said anything about the chair. But I still think about that hallway, how someone had to build it, furnish it, use it, and whatever was in that chair, it wanted us to see it. The last day of 6th grade was supposed to be a joke. That's what our teacher kept saying anyway. You've made it. Now just have fun. Relax. It's your last day. We had pizza, soda, and even a slideshow of class memories. That honestly made a few kids tear up. I wasn't emotional about it. I just wanted the day to end so I could get on my bike and ride home. But there was something off about the school that day. Something none of the teachers seemed to notice. Certain lights in the hallways were off, not just flickering, but completely dead. The West Wing bathrooms were locked for some reason, even though they were perfectly fine the day before. And then there was this weird burnt smell near the cafeteria that everyone kept blaming on the oven. But the thing that really stuck out, the janitor was missing, Mr. Kelmer. He was this tall, quiet guy who never smiled but wasn't exactly mean. He had keys to everything and was always in the background, pushing a mop or changing light bulbs. You could almost forget he worked there if you didn't see him every day. Except that day, nobody had. One of the teachers even joked that he probably left early to avoid cleaning up after the party. We all laughed. But then after lunch, I had to go to the front office to drop off a textbook. I passed by the janitor's closet on the way, the one right across from the music room, and the door was open. I don't mean cracked open, I mean wide open, which was already strange, because Mr. Kelmer always kept it locked. I slowed down, glanced around, and walked up to it. The inside was dark, darker than it should have been. There was no window, sure, but it felt like the light had been swallowed. Still, I stepped inside. Just a little dot. It was cold, the kind of cold that made your nose sting. I reached around for the light switch, but all I could find was a rough patch of wall that felt almost burnt. The smell in there wasn't bleach or cleaner like usual. It was thick, metallic, like blood and smoke. I was about to step out when I heard it, a faint rustling, like someone moving deeper inside the closet. I froze, then whispered, "Hello." Something scraped against the floor. I took one step back, then another, and that's when I heard it, my name, clear as day, whispered right next to my ear. I turned and ran. I didn't stop until I reached the front office. I must have looked terrified, because the secretary stood up immediately and asked if I was okay. I didn't tell her what happened, just said I needed to use the phone. I called my mom and asked her to pick me up early while I waited. I couldn't stop thinking about the voice. It hadn't sounded like Mr. Kelmer. It hadn't even sounded human. It was off, like it had been recorded and played back in reverse. Before my mum arrived, I saw one of the security officers enter the office. He asked the secretary something quietly, then nodded and left. He was holding a ring of keys the next day. My mum told me something strange. Apparently, the school never found Mr. Kelmar's car in the lot. He hadn't clocked out. He hadn't answered his phone. He was just gone. They assumed he had quit without notice, but even weeks later, no one had seen or heard from him. Nothing about it made the news. There wasn't even a staff-wide announcement, but the janitor's closet. It was bricked over before the new school year started. Not boarded, not locked, BRICKED, like it was never supposed to be there. I never went back to that school. I transferred before the new year began. But sometimes, late at night, I remember the whisper, and I wonder if it ever stopped calling out names, or if it's still waiting in the dark for someone else to step inside. I've never liked thunderstorms. I know that's kind of a cliched fear, but for me, it always went deeper than just the sound. I hated the way everything got so quiet right before the lightning, like the world was holding its breath. On the last day of school in 9th grade, it stormed hard. Not just a light drizzle or scattered rain. I'm talking pitch black skies by noon, wind slamming against the windows, and thunder so loud it rattled the lockers. Our school never cancelled early, no matter the weather, so we were stuck. Teachers gave up on trying to teach. Everyone was on their phones or playing cards on their desks. The power flickered twice, but never went out. Not until the last period. It was 4th block, English class, and we were watching The Giver for the 100th time. Then, out of nowhere, everything cut off. Lights, TV, air conditioning. Complete darkness, except for the dim grey light from the hallway. The teacher got up and told us to stay put, while she went to find the vice principal. A few kids took out their phones and started playing music or taking selfies in the dark. I just sat there, waiting, watching the door. 10 minutes passed. No sign of the teacher. Then 20. That's when everyone started getting antsy. People were asking each other what to do, if we should leave, if maybe this was some kind of prank for the last day. And then we heard the bell. Not the fire alarm, not the intercom, the bell. The final bell. That was weird, because the final bell had already rung 2 hours earlier. That sound was how we knew the day was almost over. But here it was again, loud, sharp, and echoing through the hallway. Everyone looked at each other, like, "Did you hear that too?" I got up and peeked out into the hallway. It was completely empty, not a single person. All the classroom doors were shut, and then I saw someone walking toward me. At first, I thought it was our teacher, but the way they moved, stiff, slow, like they were limping, it didn't look right. I squinted to try to see better. It wasn't a teacher, it was a girl. She was wearing our school's uniform, but it was old, like decades old. Different cut, different colors. Even the school crest looked off. Her head was tilted forward, hair covering her face, and she was barefoot. I backed into the room and shut the door. Everyone inside asked what I saw, and I just said, "Someone's out there." Before we could even process that, the intercom crackled on, but there was no announcement, just the sound of static, and someone breathing slow, shallow breaths, like they were leaning into the mic. That's when someone knocked on the door, not loudly, just once. 3 slow knocks that we were frozen. No one said a word. The breathing continued over the speakers. Then the door handle turned, not fast, just enough to make it rattle. Someone grabbed a desk and pushed it against the door. We stacked 2 more on top of that. The knocking stopped. But then, the breathing on the intercom turned into whispers. None of us could understand what was being said. It was just this low mumbling, like someone chanting something under their breath, over and over, and then it all stopped. The power came back on, lights flickered to life. The TV came back with the DVD menu. The intercom went silent. We waited, confused and terrified. After a few minutes, the principal's voice finally came on, saying school was ending early and that we should proceed to the buses. When we walked into the hallway, it was like nothing had happened. Teachers were chatting, kids were packing up. No one else had lost power, only our wing. Later that night, I asked my dad if there had ever been any incidents at the school. He got really quiet and said, "There was a girl back in the 70s. She died during a thunderstorm. Everyone thought she ran out during a fire drill, but no one ever saw her leave." I asked her name. He hesitated and said, "Emily Carr." Why? That name sounded familiar. So I went to my yearbook, and there it was in the senior dedication section. An old black and white photo. Girl in a faded uniform. Straight black hair covering most of her face. The caption read, "In loving memory of Emily Carr, gone too soon. May the final bell never ring for you again." I never set foot in that hallway again, and I still can't stand the sound of school bells. My school had this rumor, one of those stories passed down by older siblings and exaggerated every year. The story was about a detention room that didn't exist. According to the legend, if you got detention on the last day of school, they wouldn't send you to the normal room with the bored teacher and the worksheet packet. They'd send you somewhere else. Downstairs, that was the whole story. Downstairs, no details, no explanation, just a vague warning that if you were dumb enough to get in trouble on the final day, you'd end up in a basement nobody talked about. I always thought it was made up, until I got sent there. It was completely stupid, really. Some kid had stuffed ketchup packets into the vents in the lunchroom and they exploded everywhere. Of course, I was sitting at the same table, and instead of figuring out who actually did it, the assistant principal rounded all of us up and slapped us with end-of-day detention. I wasn't even mad at first. She told us to meet in room B7 at 3:10. I'd never heard of that room before, and when I asked one of the security staff where it was, he got weirdly quiet. Then he just pointed to a stairwell behind the auditorium. I'd never been down there. Honestly, I didn't even know that part of the building had a lower level. I got to the stairwell and started walking down. It was cold, like way colder than the rest of the school. The lights were dim and buzzed overhead. Everything felt old, like it had been sealed off for decades. I found room B7 at the end of the hallway. The door was already open. Inside were 4 desks, all bolted to the floor. No decorations, no windows, just a big wall clock with no hands and a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. 3 other students were already sitting down, kids I didn't even know, and behind the desk at the front was a man, not a teacher, not a staff member one recognized. He was wearing a grey suit, old-fashioned looking, like something from the 1950s. He had this calm expression, but something about his face didn't seem right, like it was too smooth, too symmetrical. He didn't speak, he just pointed to the last empty desk. I sat down, trying not to stare at him. The silence in that room was so thick it felt physical. No one was talking. No one even looked around. I wanted to ask someone what was going on, but I felt like if I spoke, something bad would happen. Minutes passed, then maybe an hour. No one came to check on us. There were no announcements, just that buzzing bulb. Then, one of the other students, a girl in a yellow hoodie, stood up. The man didn't react, not at first, but when she walked toward the door, he stood too. He didn't say anything, he just followed her, and when she reached for the handle, he placed his hand on the back of her neck. She stopped moving, completely, as if her body just turned off. Then he slowly guided her back to her desk, sat her down, and returned to his own chair. She didn't move again, didn't blink, didn't breathe. I looked at the others. One of the boys had tears in his eyes. The other was just staring at the floor like he was trying not to think. I don't know how long we were down there. I don't know what that room was or who that man was. All I know is, eventually, the bell rang, the real bell, and the man stood again. He said, in a voice so flat and empty it didn't sound human, "You may leave, I bolted out of there. I didn't say a word to the others. When I got upstairs, the school was already half empty. The sky was orange, the buses were gone. I checked my phone and realized it was almost 6 p.m. I'd only been in there for 40 minutes, but it had felt like hours. The next day, I looked for the kids who'd been with me in that room. None of them showed up at graduation. I asked around. No one had ever heard of them. And when I went back to that stairwell the week after, it was sealed, completely bricked over. No door, no sign there had ever been one. I tried to ask the school office about room B7, but they had no record of it. The vice principal said our school never even had a basement. But I remember that man's face, too smooth, too calm, like it had been made, not born. And sometimes, when it's quiet at night, I still hear that flat, cold voice, "You may leave." On the last day of my sophomore year, we were allowed to clean out our lockers, turn in textbooks, and roam the halls until our parents picked us up. It was one of the only days of the year that felt relaxed. No bells, no real schedule, just groups of kids wandering around, writing messages on whiteboards and taking dumb selfies. I stuck around a little longer than most people. My mum worked late, and I didn't feel like waiting outside in the heat. So I hung back in the hallway near the science wing, where it was cooler and quiet. Too quiet, actually. I remember noticing that I couldn't hear anything. No teachers. Packing up, no chatter from the front office. Not even the janitors wheeling carts. I thought maybe everyone had left already and I just hadn't realized. So I grabbed my stuff and started walking toward the front exit. And that's when I heard it. A locker slamming shut, hard. I turned, expecting to see someone, a teacher, a late student, a janitor, but the hallway was completely empty. The sound had come from the row of lockers just behind the math classrooms. I stood there for a second, debating whether to check it out. I don't know why I cared. Maybe part of me thought it was one of my friends trying to scare me. So I walked over. There were 3 locker doors standing slightly open. I didn't recognize the numbers. They were lower than the rest, the kind that don't usually get assigned. And they were old, painted over several times. Hinges rusted as I reached. For one of them, I saw something written in Sharpie on the metal. "Do not open." That should have been enough for me to turn around. But of course, I didn't. I pulled it open, empty, except for one thing. A folded piece of paper on the floor of the locker. I picked it up and opened it. There was just one sentence. "You shouldn't have done that." At that exact moment, the hallway lights flickered. Then everything went dark. I froze. My phone was in my backpack, which I had left by the front office. I was alone, or at least, I thought I was. That's when I heard breathing, not mine, coming from one of the other lockers. It wasn't loud, but it was wet, wheezing like someone was gasping through a throat full of water. I started backing away slowly. Then one of the locker doors creaked open. Not slamming, just creaking. A hand reached out. Long, pale fingers, with nails far too long, dragging against the inside of the metal. I turned and ran. I didn't look back. I sprinted to the front entrance and threw open the door so hard it slammed against the wall. I didn't stop running until I was standing in the middle of the parking lot in full daylight. There were no cars left, no staff, no students, just me. I sat on the curb until my mum pulled up, asking why I looked like I'd seen a ghost. I told her I was just tired. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I went back with some friends, not to the locker, but just to see if the school still looked the same. Everything seemed normal until I walked past the math hall again. That locker, it was gone, not closed. Not RELABELED, gone. The metal strip where it had been was sealed off, painted over like it had never existed. I didn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? But I still have the note, crumpled, stained, folded in the back of a sketchbook I haven't touched since. You shouldn't have done that. There's this moment at the end of the school year that no one ever talks about. The very last attendance check. You know, when the bell rings on the final day and the teacher calls out names just to say they did it, even though no one's paying attention. That's when this happened. I was a junior at the time. Our last day of school was kind of chaotic. Everyone had already mentally checked out. Desks were pushed into circles. Some kids had already walked out, and teachers were basically done pretending to care. My homeroom teacher, Mr. Calder, stood by the board with a clipboard and started taking attendance out of habit more than anything else. It was half a joke. People shouted here, through mouthfuls of snacks or while scribbling on yearbooks. But then he paused. He stared at the list for a long time, then called a name I'd never heard before. Leela Madsen. Nobody answered. Some people laughed, thinking he was messing around, but he didn't smile. He just called it again, louder. Leela Madsen. Still silence. One of the guys across from me muttered something like, "Dude, that's not a real person," and we all kind of agreed. There were only about 20 people in our class, and we knew every name. There was no Leela. Mister Calder frowned and looked genuinely confused. He said something like, "That's strange. She's marked present." The room went quiet. I don't know why, but something about the way he said it made my stomach drop. Then, someone in the back of the room. A girl said, "I'm here." We all turned. There was someone sitting in the last desk by the window. A desk that had been empty all year. She had long, dark hair that covered most of her face and was hunched forward like she didn't want to be noticed. I hadn't seen her come in. Nobody had. Mr. Calder didn't respond. He just stared at her. She slowly looked up. I swear to you, I had never seen her before in my life, but something about her face felt familiar. Not in a we've had class together kind of way. More like I had dreamed about her before. Like she belonged in a memory I'd forgotten. The bell rang. Everyone rushed to pack up. Laughter, zippers, hallway noise. But I couldn't stop staring at that desk. It was empty again. Completely empty. No chair pulled out. No backpack. No one walking away from it. Just gone. I asked 2 people afterward if they saw her. They looked at me like I was crazy when I brought it up to Mr. Calder. The next day, during textbook drop-off, he went pale. He said, "That name was on the roster 1 year. A few years ago. She was in this very class." Then he paused, but she died her freshman year. A car accident. He shook his head and mumbled to himself. Must have been an error on the sheet. Some kind of glitch in the system. But I don't think it was. Because that night, when I flipped through my yearbook, I found her. On a page I know wasn't there before. Group photo, class activities, random candids, and in the background of one of the pictures, sitting on a bench, behind the rest of us, was Leela, alone, looking straight at the camera and smiling. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to subscribe and tap the notification bell so you never miss another night of terror. We post true horror stories, real encounters, and the unexplained. And remember, what's waiting in the dark might already know your name. Thanks for watching. Until next time, stay safe, stay alert. And whatever you do, don't turn around.